Let me tell you a story so gripping it'll stay with you long after it ends, rising from the lonely plains of the frontier where silence cuts deeper than any blade. This is where destiny threads itself through dust and danger, where one man's stand can shake an entire county. And it all started with something almost invisible, a forgotten cannon under an old canvas, small enough to ignore, yet mighty enough to change everything. Before we kick off this adventure, don't forget to hit like on the video and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. Caelrym Duskmore was 73, long past the years of war, long past the years of fighting, long past anything except tending his land and watching the Kansas sun slide behind the hills. His farm was modest, 200 acres of good earth in eastern Kansas, clean water running through it, enough land to raise a few cattle and coax a life of quiet from the soil. He had bought it 15 years earlier on his army pension, leaving the Union ranks behind, folding away his uniform, trying to bury the blood, the screams, the bodies, all the memories men like him carried whether they wanted to or not. But peace in the West was a fragile thing, especially when powerful men set their eyes on what you owned. The Blackwater family held 50,000 acres wrapping around Caelrym's farm like a tightening noose. A cattle empire, 10,000 head roaming the open range, fortunes made off beef driven east. And they wanted more, always more. To Voren Blacktide, Caelrym's farm wasn't a home. It was an obstacle, an island in the middle of his kingdom. Voren had tried to buy the land 5 times, and 5 times Caelrym had refused. Each refusal carved deeper anger into the cattle baron's pride. The 6th offer came another way, not with letters, not with lawyers, but with force. Caelrym was working his corn rows when he heard the thunder, hooves, dozens of them, tearing across his land. He looked up and saw 50 cattle charging through his crops, cowboys pushing them hard and deliberate, smashing everything under their weight. Corn flattened, wheat shredded, months of labor ruined in minutes. Caelrym ran toward them, shouting, arms waving. They only laughed and kept driving the herd. One rider broke off, young, cruel-eyed, a grin carved across his face. Slade Rookfall looked down at the old man with cold amusement. "Voren Blacktide sends his regards," he sneered. "Says your land's better off as grazing ground. Says you ought to reconsider his generous offer. Says accidents like this don't stop till you sell. Be smart, old-timer. Know when you're beat." Then he rode off, leaving Caelrym alone in the wreckage of his year's livelihood. It wasn't random. It was a message, a declaration of war, the kind waged by cattle barons who believed power overwrote justice and gold rewrote the law. Caelrym walked back toward his house, slow and steady, his knees aching, his breath tight. He should have felt fear. He should have felt defeat. But instead, something older stirred, something he'd buried 15 years earlier. He wasn't remembering ripe fields or quiet nights. He was remembering Gettysburg, Shiloh, Antietam, the roar of cannon, the weight of command, the cost of every decision. Back then, he wasn't Caelrym Duskmore, the farmer. He was General Duskmore, the Iron Thunder, a man whose artillery shattered Confederate lines and carved history in fire. Voren Blacktide wanted war. Caelrym knew war better than any man alive, and hidden in his barn, beneath an old canvas, waited his oldest companion, a 12-pound Napoleon, retired but never forgotten, resting like a sleeping beast. His Wild West stories spread far and wide, but nothing would prepare anyone for what came next. That evening, Voren Blacktide himself appeared, riding up with 10 armed men. He dismounted on Caelrym's porch, radiating the smug confidence of a man who believed the world bent around his will. "Mr. Duskmore," he called. "I heard about the little mishap with your crops. Tragic. My men can get careless. Hard to keep cattle under control on the open range. Caelrim stood silent, reading the man, watching the arrogance settle around him like dust. I'm here to make another offer, Vorin continued smoothly. $3,000. Fair compensation. Take the money, move on, start over somewhere safer. Somewhere accidents don't happen. No. Vorin's smile cracked. No? He echoed. Caelrim repeated, steady as stone. No. Vorin's voice hardened. I'm being reasonable, but my patience isn't endless. This is cattle country. Big outfits need room, small farms like yours. He waved a hand. They get swept aside. That's nature. That's progress. That's reality. This is my land, Caelrim replied. Bought it fair. Won't sell it. Not to you, not to anyone. Your men destroyed my crops. That's trespass. Property damage. A crime. I could have you arrested. Vorin barked a laugh. Arrested? By who? Sheriff Brask Holloway? He works for me. Judge Verith Crowley? He works for me too. This whole county answers to me. You're alone, old man. No family, no friends, no shield. Just you standing against my entire operation. That's not a fight. It's suicide. Caelrim didn't flinch. I've faced worse odds. Survived them too. Vorin narrowed his eyes. When? When have you ever been in real danger? Gettysburg, Caelrim said quietly. July 2nd, 1863. 3,000 Confederate soldiers charged my guns. I had 200 men. They should have crushed us. But we held. Broke them. 800 dead because I knew tactics. I knew angles. I knew how to turn the field. He stepped closer. Your 10 cowboys don't trouble me, Mr. Blacktide. Your 50,000 acres don't impress me. I've commanded 50,000 men. I've buried tens of thousands. One more fight doesn't frighten me. Vorin's confidence faltered. You're bluffing, he growled. You're just an old farmer. Test me. You're just an old farmer, nothing more. Caelrim Duskmore didn't blink. Then test me. Send your men. Drive your herds across my land again. See what happens. His voice stayed level, carved from the same iron that once commanded battlefields. And when you do remember this moment, remember I warned you. Remember I offered you the chance to walk away. Vorin Blacktide stiffened. Is that a threat? It's a promise, Caelrim replied. One soldier speaking to a man who has no idea what kind of fire he's playing with. Now get off my land. Vorin swung back into the saddle, face burning with fury and humiliation. As he wheeled his horse around, he spat. You just signed your own death warrant, old man. Caelrim didn't answer. He simply watched them ride off into the dust, then turned for the barn. It was time to revisit an old companion. The barn's frame groaned with age, but the structure stood solid as ever. Caelrim stepped inside, moving past rusted tools and stacked hay until he reached the back corner, where a massive shape slept under heavy canvas. Untouched for 15 long years. He pulled the cover free. His 12-pound Napoleon cannon gleamed beneath it, bronze barrel unmarred, carriage of wood and iron still sturdy. He'd cared for it like a relic, oiling the gears, polishing the metal, tending it month after month. Old soldiers didn't retire. They waited. Caelrim ran his hand down the cold barrel, memories rising warm and sharp. How many times had he unleashed thunder from this very weapon? Hundreds, maybe more. Every shot deliberate, every shot earned. He examined the ammunition laid out with military precision. 3 deadly forms. Solid shot. Heavy iron spheres meant for distance and breaking anything foolish enough to stand firm. Grape shot. Canvas bags filled with iron pellets that sprayed wide like a giant's shotgun, built to shred through crowds. And canister. Tins packed with metal balls, pure devastation at close range. 20 men could fall from a single blast, the last resort of an artillerist, the weapon that turned tides. He had plenty of each, enough to wage a small war, and Vorin Blacktide was bringing one. The next day, Caelrim prepared the land with the instincts of a veteran. He built earthen breastworks, measured distances, judged angles, and plotted firing lanes. Out here, precision wasn't just discipline, it was survival. By sundown, everything stood ready. The cannon faced the main road, loaded with canister. If they came riding hard, as he knew they would, they'd gallop straight into the maw of hell. Same mistake Confederate cavalry made at Gettysburg. Some lessons deserved repeating. Caelrim settled onto his porch, waiting, watching. He knew men like Vorin. Humiliation made them dangerous. Pride demanded they return. Power demanded they crush whoever dared resist. And men swollen with pride and power always made the same mistakes. 3 hours after dark, the sound came. Hoofbeats, lots of them. Torches flared. Voices rose in angry shouts. They weren't hiding. They weren't cautious. They were coming to kill. Dozens of riders swept toward the farm, enough to burn it to ashes, enough to terrify any ordinary man. Caelrim rose, walked to his cannon, and touched flame to the slow match. The fuse hissed alive. Ready. Waiting. Just like him. "Come on," he muttered softly. "Let's see if any of you learned a thing since Pickett's charge." Then the night trembled. 20 riders stormed toward him, torches blazing, rifles lifted, war cries ripping through the darkness. They expected fear. They expected surrender. They expected an old man to break, to run, to hide. They had no idea who they were riding toward. Bang! Caelrim Duskmore stood waiting, steady, patient, unmoved. Calm as a man who'd lived through far worse. He'd faced charging cavalry, roaring artillery, whole battalions of infantry. Compared to real war, this felt small. Manageable, almost routine. The riders closed to 200 yards. Perfect distance for canister. Caelrim took careful aim, adjusting for the night, the movement, the spread. Years of battlefield instinct fused with cold calculation, every breath guided by decades of experience. He lowered the slow match to the touch hole. The Napoleon erupted. 12 pounds of powder tore open the darkness, the cannon leaping back on its carriage with a recoil he controlled like an old partner. Fire belched forward. Smoke rolled outward. The sound cracked the night like the sky splitting in half. The canister fanned out like death sweeping its arm, hundreds of iron balls blasting across a 75-degree arc. Devastating, unforgiving, final. 4 riders fell instantly. Horses screamed, toppled, crashed into one another. The charge shattered. Panic crushed whatever courage they'd had left. No one expected artillery, true military firepower, from a retired farmer. They wheeled away, regrouping 300 yards out, just beyond effective range. Shouting rose, confusion spread, fear took command. Caelrim watched them argue, gesture wildly, trying to make sense of what had hit them. He reloaded with the precision of a man who'd done this 10,000 times. Swab the barrel, pour the powder, ram it tight, load the shot, ram again, prime, ready. 90 seconds, faster than most full artillery crews. Experience cut the wasted motion. Working alone meant no coordination, no missteps. The riders split, attempting a flank, 2 groups sweeping out on either side. A smart move. Classic cavalry tactic, effective against rifles, worthless against a cannon with room to pivot. Caelrim hauled the carriage left, heavy but manageable, lined up the angle and fired again. Another boom, another blast of iron storm. 2 more riders dropped, their horses scattered, blinded by terror. The flank broke apart. He reloaded, swung toward the group on the right. But they were already fleeing. They'd seen enough. They chose life over pride. The attack was done. 20 riders had arrived. 12 could still sit a saddle. 8 lay broken in the dirt. A complete, humiliating failure. Caelrim watched them vanish into the darkness, their torches shrinking to sparks, then nothing. He didn't chase. He didn't have to. The message had been carved into the night. Caelrim Duskmore was no helpless homesteader, no easy victim, no man to provoke without consequence. He covered the cannon, walked back to the house, brewed himself a pot of coffee, and sat on the porch, waiting for dawn, waiting for Vorin Blacktide's next move. Because this wasn't finished. Men like Vorin never backed down. They escalated. More riders, more guns, more violence. Good. Caelrim still had plenty of ammunition. At sunrise, a visitor approached. Not Vorin Blacktide, but his son, Argan Blacktide, a man in his 30s. He rode alone, a white flag raised high, hands open and empty. A peace gesture, or bait. Caelrim treated it as both. "Mr. Duskmore," Argan called from 100 yards out. "I'm unarmed. I came to talk, just talk." Caelrim Duskmore stepped out onto his porch, rifle resting loosely in his hand. Not aimed, just there, reminding the world he wasn't defenseless. "You've got 5 minutes," he said. "Speak from where you are." Argan Blacktide swallowed. "My father sent me. He wants to know what you're using, what kind of weapon that was. None of us have ever seen anything like it. The noise, the force, the distance." He shook his head. "What is it?" "Artillery," Caelrim answered. "A Napoleon 12-pounder, standard field gun during the war. You're too young to know much about it. But your father isn't. He heard cannons plenty back then. He should have recognized the sound." Argan tried to process it. An artillery piece, on a farm. Insane. Impossible. But undeniably real. "You're threatening my family with a military weapon," he snapped. "That's illegal. They'll arrest you. They'll hang you." Caelrim let out a cold, empty laugh. "Illegal? Your father sent 20 armed riders to burn my home and kill me. That's attempted murder, arson, conspiracy." He leaned forward. "And you're worried about my cannon?" "Son," he continued, voice low. "In a war, the one who wins decides what's lawful. Your father started this fight. I intend to finish it, legal or not. Only results matter now." "This isn't war," Argan protested. "It's a property dispute. Civilized towns have courts, judges, laws." "Your father ignored all of that," Caelrim replied. "He chose violence, so I'm answering in the only language he respects. If you want civilization so badly, tell Vorin Blacktide to sell off his cattle kingdom and ride out of here. Leave me be." His eyes hardened. "Otherwise, I'll treat this for what it is. A war. And war is something I've mastered." Argan bristled. "My father has 100 men. You're one old man with one antique cannon. You can't win." "I already have," Caelrim said. "Last night. 20 came. 8 didn't ride home. That's a 40% casualty rate. Your father paid good money to train those men, to earn their loyalty, and I destroyed that investment in a minute and a half." He stepped closer, voice sharp as a blade. "How many more nights like that can he afford? How long before his men refuse to charge? How long before fear beats out their wages?" "You're insane," Argan whispered. "No," Caelrim said quietly. "I'm experienced. Big difference." He pointed toward the road. "Now go. Tell your father I'm waiting. Tell him to bring all 100 if he wants. I'll put them in the ground if I have to. I've killed thousands. 100 more won't trouble my sleep." Argan turned and rode away fast, fear in every motion. Good. Fear was a weapon, as vital as powder or steel. Caelrim had taught that to young officers once, and practiced it across every battlefield he ever survived. It worked in war. It worked against cattle lords, too. 3 days passed without a sound from the Blacktides. Caelrim used the quiet well. He built more defenses, trenches, firing channels, clean sightlines. Everything he once drilled into cadets at West Point. Everything he'd used in real campaigns. His little farm became a fortress, small, but lethal. Built so every advantage belonged to him. He also let the town know the truth. How Vorin Blacktide's herd destroyed his crops, how armed riders tried to kill him, and how he'd defended himself under the law. Pure self-defense, a man's right to protect his land. People listened. They sympathized. Small farmers hated the Blacktide Empire. The arrogance, the bullying, the way they crushed anyone who stood in their path. Support rolled in quietly. Food, ammunition, bits of information from passers-by. A silent network of resistance formed around him. Caelrim hadn't asked for it. He hadn't organized it. But it grew anyway. It happened naturally, without planning, without meetings. Folks were simply worn down by cattle barons pulling the strings, worn down by sheriffs who turned their backs on crimes committed by the wealthy, worn down by judges who ruled however the bribe money pushed them, worn down by a system that protected the powerful and crushed anyone beneath them. Caelrim Duskmoor's stand lit a spark. One old soldier with a cannon, refusing to bow, holding his ground, defending what was his rights, his land, his dignity. People felt it. They rallied to it. It became something simple. Hope. Proof that fighting back wasn't a fantasy. Proof that power could be challenged. Proof the small and the weak weren't doomed to lose. On the fourth day, a stranger rode in. Tall, aging, maybe 60. His threadbare Confederate coat hung loose, worn but honored. He introduced himself as Marshal Draven Holtzspire, former artillery officer, Tennessee Division, a man who once fought against Caelrim at Shiloh. "General Duskmoor," Holtzspire said, "I heard what you're facing. I'm here to offer my help. Old enemies make fine allies when a new threat rises." Caelrim studied him. An enemy once, a potential ally now. Strange how the world turned. "What kind of help?" Caelrim asked. "Knowledge," Holtzspire replied. "I commanded 6 batteries, 18 guns. I know tactics. I know how Vorin Blacktide will answer your defiance." He knelt in the dirt, tracing crude diagrams. "He'll bring every man he has, hit you fast from multiple sides. A full assault, center push with rifle cover, mounted flanks on both edges. He'll expect your cannon to lock onto one group while the others sweep around." He glanced up. "That's how untrained minds think." "And trained minds?" Caelrim asked. "Trained minds use the battlefield," Holtzspire said. "You've got elevation, clear fields, multiple firing positions. You can pivot, reload, change angles. Make them believe you've got more than one gun. Let fear do half the work." For the first time in days, Caelrim smiled, a real smile. "Marshal Holtzspire, welcome aboard." "With pleasure, General," Holtzspire replied. "With pleasure." 2 veterans, once enemies, now standing shoulder to shoulder against a new empire. Irony thick enough to taste. They came at dawn. Just as Holtzspire predicted, the 5th day brought 50 armed riders, rifles, pistols, torches burning bright. Vorin Blacktide led them himself, riding at the front, brimming with confidence. 50 against one old man. He'd learn soon enough. Caelrim and Holtzspire had set the Napoleon on a small rise behind earthworks. Ideal elevation, full rotation. Stakes marked out every measured distance, every angle calculated, every contingency prepared. A soldier's precision now turned loose in a civilian fight. "They'll split 3 ways," Holtzspire murmured. "Center rush, 2 flanking units. They'll try to divide your fire. Standard pincer movement. Good against one fixed point." He tapped the cannon. "Not so good against ready artillery." He was exactly right. Blacktide split his men, 20 in the center, 15 on each flank. They charged all at once, roaring like wild horses, and for untrained civilians it was surprisingly coordinated. Someone had taught them. Maybe Thyron Gallomir. Maybe someone else. Didn't matter. Predictable tactics were still predictable. Caelrim fired at the center first, loaded with grape shot. The blast shredded through 10 riders. Horses toppled. Men screamed. The center broke instantly. Holtzbeyer was already shoving the carriage sideways, lining up the barrel towards the left flank, ready before Caelrim even finished ramming home the next charge. Caelrim reloaded. 90 seconds, same as always. Holtzbeyer sighted, adjusted, fired. Another iron storm. 8 more riders down. The left flank buckled, scattered, reeled back in chaos. They swung the cannon toward the right. But that group had seen enough. Their charge stalled. Their courage faltered. They milled nervously, unsure whether death would come from their front, or the sky itself. Fear began to drown out anger. No one wanted to be the next man in the cannon's path. No one wanted to charge into that widening cone of death. "Hold," Caelrim Duskmore commanded quietly. "Let them stew in it. Let doubt do the work. Fear is a better weapon than bullets." The right flank froze. The shaken remnants of the center and left pulled together in a ragged cluster. 50 men had become 25 who could still stand. 25 casualties. Half their force gone, disastrous by any battlefield measure. And they hadn't even crossed Caelrim's property line. Voren Blacktide rode forward alone, a white flag fluttering at his side. He called out for a parley. Caelrim allowed him to approach, rifle laid across his arm, while Marshal Draven Holtzbeyer stood beside him. 2 old war horses watching a younger man finally recognize the magnitude of his mistake. "This is madness," Voren shouted. "You're killing my men over a patch of dirt, over nothing." "You lit the fuse," Caelrim answered. "You stampeded my crops. You sent armed riders to burn my home. You declared war first. Turns out I'm simply better at it than you. Now leave. Take your men. Don't come back." He raised a hand towards the cannon. "I have ammunition. You have a limited number of riders. Mathematics favors me." Voren's face twisted. "The law will hear about this. You'll hang for murder." "Self-defense isn't murder," Caelrim replied. "Ask any honest judge. I don't mean the ones you own." Voren stared, powerless, the illusion of authority collapsing around him. His money meant nothing here. His influence couldn't stack up against a man who'd commanded battlefields. Reality was a brutal instructor. "I'll ruin you," Voren barked. "I'll bring marshals, federal troops. You can't fight the government." Marshal Holtzbeyer stepped forward. "Mr. Blacktide," he said calmly, "I'm Marshal Draven Holtzbeyer, Confederate artillery. I fought against General Duskmore at Shiloh. We lost badly. 1,700 men in a single day because he understood angles and timing better than anyone alive." Holtzbeyer pointed toward the broken remnants of Voren's force. "You've got 50 men. He's killed hundreds. Thousands. You're not special. You're not frightening. You're just the next fool who underestimated him." Voren looked back at his riders and saw what Caelrim already knew. Fear, hesitation, shattered confidence. His empire depended on intimidation, but intimidation failed against a man who couldn't be cowed. Someone who'd lived through real war, real carnage, real loss. "This isn't finished," Voren said, but the words were hollow, drained of weight, a threat only in shape, not substance. He turned and rode off. His riders followed slowly, glancing back as if expecting another blast. Caelrim didn't fire. There was no need. Message sent. Battle won. When they were gone, Caelrim sank onto a nearby crate, drained, the adrenaline bleeding out of his 73-year-old body. He'd done it, defended his land, outmatched a far larger force, victory born from skill and memory, just like the old days. "You holding up?" Holtzbeier asked. "Just tired," Caelrim said. "Old bones, but still breathing. Good enough." His gaze drifted to the cannon, his steadfast companion, still faithful, still deadly. "Thank you," Caelrim said quietly, "for coming, for standing with me." "Thank you for the chance," Holtzbeier replied. "Been 15 years since I fired a proper gun. I missed it. The precision, the numbers, the satisfaction of a clean shot." He chuckled. "Guess nostalgia's a dangerous thing." Both men laughed. Grim, knowing laughter. The kind only veterans shared, too familiar with death to be rattled by a little more. Men who understood that sometimes violence answered violence. Men who knew that strength could shield the vulnerable, and that old soldiers never truly hung up their boots. They simply waited for the next fight. Over the next week, Caelrim Duskmore rebuilt. He fixed the torn-up fields, salvaged what crops could be saved, and replanted the rest. Life eased back into rhythm. Calm returned to the land. Vorin Blacktide never returned, never sent riders, never delivered another threat. Word traveled far. The tale spread, told, retold, and embellished. The old farmer with the cannon, the general who refused to yield, the man who outmaneuvered a cattle baron using battlefield strategy. People remembered. Small farmers felt a measure of safety. Cattle barons felt a prickle of caution. The balance shifted, just a little, and maybe only for a moment, but shifted all the same. One man with one cannon had tilted the scales, had proven resistance wasn't a fantasy, had shown that the strength of yesterday could still guard the present, that old soldiers still mattered. A month later, the county held elections. A new sheriff was chosen, Sheriff Sorn Haldrake, a man not bought by black-tide money, an honest veteran who recognized Caelrim's actions for what they were, self-defense, lawful and justified. Case closed. A new judge, Judge Mavrin Quilthorne, replaced the corrupt local magistrate. His first ruling: Vorin Blacktide owed Caelrim Duskmore damages, ruined crops, emotional distress, legal expenses. $20,000, a staggering judgment. Blacktide paid. No arguments, no appeals. He knew the war was lost, utterly, entirely, permanently. Caelrim used the money well. He expanded his farm, bought sturdier equipment, hired 2 young workers, veterans from opposite sides of the old war, Union and Confederate, now building something better together. Former enemies, shaping a shared future. The cannon remained in the barn, covered, respected, remembered. Caelrim still polished it monthly, still kept it in working order, just in case. But he prayed never to fire it again. Once had been enough. Twice would be sorrow. A third time would prove the world had learned nothing. Marshal Draven Holtzbeier visited once a month. They'd sit together on the porch, sipping coffee, revisiting old battles, trading perspectives, dissecting mistakes. 2 veterans studying the past, not glorifying it, just understanding it. They argued angles, debated decisions, wondered over moments that changed the course of history. "Ever regret it?" Holtzbeier asked one evening. "The war? The killing? All those men?" Caelrim considered the question. "Regret implies I'd change it if I could," he said slowly. "But I can't. It happened. It's carved into the past. The dead don't rise, and the years don't rewrite themselves." He breathed out. "Do I wish it hadn't been necessary?" "Yes. Do I wish we'd found a better path? Absolutely. But with the choices we had, given the moment, the chaos, the duty, I'd make the same calls. That isn't a lack of regret. It's accepting reality." Holtzbeier nodded. "I feel the same. We did what our country demanded. what honor expected, what duty required. If the cause was flawed, if the leaders were wrong, that blame rests with them, not with the soldiers who followed orders. "We fought well," Kelrim said quietly, "and we survived." "That's enough," Holtzbeier replied. They sat in a comfortable hush. Two old men, two old rivals, two old friends, watching a Kansas sunset paint the sky in blazing orange and deep red. A peaceful evening, hard-earned, protected by a willingness to fight when forced to. Kelrim's farm flourished. His name shielded him. His cannon waited in the shadows. And his legacy lived on, not as a general, not as a war hero, but as a man who refused to bend, not as a soldier of rank, but as a stubborn farmer who refused to bow, a man who pushed back, a man who proved that what was right could outmatch raw might, that skill could outrun numbers, that one determined soul could tilt an entire fight. For Kelrim Duskmore, that was enough. More than enough. Everything. The years moved on. Kelrim's homestead turned into a place folks spoke about in hushed admiration. Travelers drifted through wanting a glimpse of the legendary cannon, wanting to hear the tale straight from the man who had once stared down Voren Blacktide's forces with nothing but grit and a piece of Civil War iron. Kelrim always obliged, telling it plain, without dressing it up. Reality didn't need stretching. The truth was already powerful enough. From time to time, young men rode in seeking guidance. How do you stand your ground against someone stronger? How do you defend what's yours when the odds look hopeless? How do you fight a battle you were never meant to win? Kelrim taught them. Not brutality, not tricks, not bloodshed, but principles. Preparation is strength. Knowledge is leverage. Courage is born from competence. And beware the well-trained man far more than the loud, angry one. Some of those young riders went on to make their own stands, guard their own land, face down their own bullies. They said Kelrim Duskmore taught them how, called him mentor, called him inspiration. He accepted the praise quietly, knowing he had only passed along old truths, the kind forged long before any of them were born. Wisdom carried forward. Legacy growing roots. By the time Kelrim reached 80, age finally caught up. His body weakened, his steps slowed. The doctor warned he had half a year left, maybe less. Kelrim didn't flinch. He'd lived richly, seen the world in flame and in peace, outlasted most of his generation, fought in wars, raised a farm, changed the fate of a county. That was enough. Marshal Draven Holtzbeier began visiting more often, sensing the final stretch ahead. Two old friends sat together and wandered through every topic. War, calm, choices, regrets, legacy, memory. All the conversations men have when time begins to thin. "What do you want people to remember?" Holtzbeier asked. "General? Farmer? Fighter? Teacher?" Kelrim paused, searching for the simplest truth. "Remember me as the man who didn't back down," he said, "who stood firm, who protected what was his. Titles aren't the point. What matters is the principle. Never bow to bullies, never let power overrun justice, never mistake age for weakness. That's the piece of me worth passing on." "It will be," Holtzbeier promised. "I'll tell it the way it happened. No tall tales, no legend bigger than truth. The real Kelrim Duskmore, the man who sowed fields and fired cannons, the man who ended thousands in battle and later shared coffee with former enemies, the man too large to be just one thing." "Thank you," Kelrim whispered. "That means everything." He passed away peacefully on an autumn evening, friends close by, Holtzbeier's hand clasped in his own. Once an enemy, now a brother. A circle long in the making finally closing. They buried Kelrim on his land. A modest grave. A simple marker. Kelrim Duskmore, 1807 to 1887, soldier. Farmer, defender. The cannon was set beside him, not as a threat, but as a monument, war-forged steel reborn as a symbol of peace, a fitting end for a complicated man who had spent a lifetime straddling both worlds. The funeral drew a crowd that stretched across the hillside. Veterans from both sides of the old divide, blue coats and gray jackets, stood shoulder to shoulder. They'd come to honor a man who had fought fiercely, lived purposefully, and met his end with quiet dignity. Stories flowed like spring water. Laughter and sorrow mingled as they shared memories of Caelrim Duskmore. A life that mattered, a life that shifted things, a life that lit fires in others. Then came a surprise. Vorin Blacktide arrived. A hush swept over the mourners as he approached the grave. He stood still for a long moment before speaking softly to Marshal Draven Holtspire. "I hated him," Vorin admitted, "for years, for beating me, humiliating me, ruining every plan I built." His voice cracked. "But I respected him more than any man I ever fought. He showed me that power alone is worthless. Money can't buy victory against someone with conviction, with skill, with courage." He bowed his head. "He was a better man than me, better than most. I'm grateful I never managed to kill him, grateful he didn't kill more of my men, grateful the world had a Caelrim Duskmore living in it." Holtspire nodded gently. He would have appreciated that. Growth, humility, peace, that's the tribute he always hoped for. After the burial, Holtspire did something no one expected. He donated Caelrim's entire farm to the county, with strict conditions. The land must remain intact. It must become a school. It must teach farming and history. It must tell Caelrim's story, and the old canon must remain on display. The county agreed. Soon, a small museum rose from the soil, and the Caelrim Duskmore Memorial School opened its doors. It taught agriculture. It taught the hard lessons of frontier conflict. It taught that violence should always be the last choice. But when forced into a corner, your response must be decisive. That was Caelrim's creed. Avoid war when you can, win it when you cannot. Students traveled from far and wide. They learned about the general who became a farmer, the farmer who refused to yield, the veteran who lived in peace but stood ready for battle. The canon took on a new meaning. No longer a symbol of destruction, but of vigilance. A reminder that peace survives only when good people prepare to defend it. Across the nation, schools borrowed the image, the old canon in the barn, the quiet man with steel in his spine, a metaphor for readiness, for strength beneath calm, for the truth that tolerance means nothing without the will to stand against those who seek to break it. Caelrim's legacy spread, not by force, but by example, by story, by inspiration. The farmer with a cannon, the general who would not bend, the old man who taught a cattle baron fear, the veteran who made peace with former foes, the mentor who raised a generation of defenders, the reminder that age isn't weakness and experience isn't obsolescence. One man, one cannon, one moment that changed everything. Years later, a historian named Elois Deepquill arrived at the museum. She was writing a book on the era, on the tensions between cattle dynasties and small homesteads. She spoke to Holtspire's descendants, read Caelrim's journals, studied the canon, reviewed every witness account and document she could find. Her book became a national bestseller. The General's Last Stand, Caelrim Duskmore, and the Cattle Baron Wars. It told everything: his early service, his quiet retirement, the war with Vorin Blacktide, the cannon battle, and the ripples that followed. Told truthfully, told fully, told in a way that ensured Caelrim Duskmore would never be forgotten. The book shifted how people viewed the era. Readers began to see the tangled truth. The cattle bosses like Vorin Blacktide weren't monsters in every breath, and the homesteaders weren't saints carved from pure virtue. Both sides had their claims, their wounds, their frustrations. But the methods, that was where the lines were drawn. Vorin Blacktide had turned to force. Caelrim Duskmore had answered with defense. That distinction mattered, and it explained why the world remembered one man's stand and questioned the other's choices. Schools adopted the story, not as dry military history, but as a lesson in ethics, a case study in conflict resolution, a blueprint for resisting bullies, a guide to defending what is yours while using only the necessary measure of force, a reminder that peace is always the goal, but preparation for trouble is never wasted. These were the principles Caelrim lived by, the wisdom he carried from war into the quiet soil of his farm. Modern readers debated endlessly. Was Caelrim a hero? A villain? Both? Neither? The arguments mattered because the truth was nuanced. Good men sometimes used harsh means. Men who acted selfishly often had reasons shaped by the world they lived in. History was not clean-cut. It was tangled, human, imperfect. That, in itself, became the truest lesson. Caelrim wasn't flawless. He was real. A man shaped by scars, haunted by memories, and still determined to make a difference. The museum grew. New halls opened. Civil War exhibits, artillery evolution, the Homestead Act, the rise of cattle empires, everything needed to understand why Caelrim made the choices he did and how they rippled outward through time. Visitors traveled from across the globe. They studied. They reflected. They applied Caelrim's lessons to their own struggles, moments when power loomed over principle, when the strong threatened the vulnerable. And always, the cannon remained, a bronze sentinel, a monument, a story in metal. Students placed their palms on its cold surface, imagining the force that once shook the earth, imagining Caelrim's iron resolve as he faced impossible odds. They walked away changed, steadier, braver, more willing to defend what mattered. That was Caelrim's real triumph. Not routing Vorin Blacktide's riders, not safeguarding a stretch of prairie, not surviving the clash. His victory was in the generations he fortified, those who learned that one person could hold the line. That old age didn't mean weakness. That experience was a weapon. That preparedness was protection. That strength could shield the vulnerable. That warriors could seek peace and still know how to fight. Caelrim Duskmore had been all things at once: farmer, soldier, mentor, protector, paradox, man. And he became something more, something enduring, something carved into the nation's memory long after the cannon's last thunder faded. In 1950, 70 years after Caelrim's passing, the United States Army formally honored him. A posthumous medal. Recognition of his innovations, his tactics, his brilliance. They studied the battle against Vorin Blacktide, mapped Caelrim's firing angles, his field positions, his flawless timing, declared it a masterpiece of defensive artillery, so precise it could be taught at West Point. And so they created a course, the Duskmore Defense, a lesson in how one man, with one weapon, held off 50 attackers through planning, positioning, psychology, and lived experience. Technology moved forward, but the principles remained carved in stone, and modern soldiers still learned from the old Civil War veteran who refused to bend. Modern tacticians began applying Caelrim Duskmore's battlefield thinking to present-day threats. His principles guided outpost defense, convoy protection, and the holding of vulnerable positions, every lesson rooted in the same foundation he demonstrated on that Kansas farm. Preparation mattered. Knowledge was leverage. Fear, if used wisely, could break numbers long before bullets did. Simple truths, enduring truths, military truths, Soon the course became mandatory. Every cadet at West Point studied Caelrym's stand. Every artillery officer memorized his angles, his timing, his philosophy. His name rose into the ranks of America's military greats, not because of what he'd done in wartime, but because of what he accomplished after. He became the rare figure who proved that a soldier's discipline could protect civilian life, that service did not end with discharge, and that the worlds of warrior and citizen did not oppose one another. They completed each other. Veterans understood this instantly. They recognized the structure, the struggle, returning home, carrying violence in their bones, wanting peace in their hearts, yet knowing they must still be ready if trouble ever rose again. Caelrym gave them permission to be both, a fighter and a farmer, a man who could destroy, and a man who preferred to build. Strength and gentleness living side by side without shame. Support groups began teaching his story. Counselors used it as a bridge, a model. Proof that civilian life wasn't a step backward, but a new mission where every skill still mattered. Where experience wasn't a burden, it was an asset. Thousands drew comfort from that story. Thousands found direction. Thousands reclaimed purpose. Caelrym's legacy kept stretching outward, reaching people he never met, healing wounds he never saw, answering questions he never faced. Because his principles were universal. Because truth survives changing eras. Because one man's example can ignite countless others. That was real immortality. Not a body that lives forever, but a life that shapes the world long after it ends. Caelrym's triumph wasn't saving his own land. Wasn't breaking Vorin Blacktide's riders. Wasn't the thunder of the old Napoleon cannon. His victory was in the inspiration he left behind. Steady, quiet, unshakable. Today, the Duskmore Farm stands as a national historic site, preserved just as it was. The museum has grown. The school thrives. The cannon rests proudly beside his grave. Visitors still come, children, teachers, soldiers, dreamers. They hear the story. They place a hand on cold bronze. They walk the same ground Caelrym defended. They study the angles, the earthworks, the rise where the cannon once roared. And they leave changed. Children touch the metal and learn that size doesn't equal strength, that you don't need youth to be effective, that you don't need numbers to stand tall. You only need readiness, conviction, a heart set on what's right. Adults visit seeking answers, facing their own versions of cattle barons, their own impossible odds. They stand where Caelrym once stood, imagining the weight he carried, the resolve he found. And they leave steadier, more grounded, more willing to defend what's theirs, their land, their rights, their dignity. That was the true measure of Caelrym Duskmore's victory. Not a triumph recorded in dusty archives, not a military conquest etched in stone, but a human victory, quiet, personal, and deeply individual, one person at a time, one spark of courage at a time, one soul deciding, I will not back down. Spread that across years, across counties, across generations, and Caelrym's single stand becomes 1,000 stands. One cannon becomes 1,000 defenses. One stubborn farmer becomes a symbol for every man and woman who refuses to bow to greed, power, intimidation, or fear. The bronze plaque at the museum's entrance reads, Caelrym Duskmore, 1807 to 1887. He proved that a prepared heart outweighs 100 unprepared foes. That age sharpens wisdom rather than dulling strength. That peace is priceless, but peace survives only when someone is willing to guard it. That old soldiers do not fade, they train the next ones. Hold your ground, protect what is yours. Stay ready. That is his message. That is his inheritance. That is the gift he left behind for all of us. Visitors stop to read the words. They photograph them, share them, repeat them, carry them into their own lives. And Caelrim's thunder continues, not as cannon fire, but as conviction, as principle, as a truth passed down like a torch through time. A reminder that one person's resolve can tilt the scales, that refusing to yield reshapes destinies, that preparation is the shield that prevents devastation, that old warriors still guide, still inspire, still matter. The man is gone, the field gun stands silent, but the lesson, that lesson refuses to die. It echoes forever, rolling through the years like distant artillery over a wide prairie. Steady, clear, impossible to ignore, impossible to forget. Caelrim Duskmoor's thunder will never be silenced. Finally, let me send my deep thanks to you. Thank you for listening, and for allowing this story to speak to your heart. The Wild West still holds countless truths, some painful, some tender, all worth remembering. Stay with us, subscribe, comment, and invite others to discover these untamed stories. From our hearts to yours, thank you for being part of this journey. Aviso legal. Disclaimer. Each story shared here is produced for storytelling enjoyment. Certain scenes may include fictional or dramatized elements inspired by historical circumstances, although AI tools assist us in visuals, narration, and script development. The emotional tone, editing, and quality control are conducted by people to ensure meaningful experiences. We fully uphold YouTube's policies, using no deceptive recreations or impersonations of real individuals. All creative resources are properly licensed. Unauthorized copying, re-uploading, or remixing is not permitted. Thank you for supporting the effort behind every episode we create.